Welcome back, my friends, to Praying the Psalms in a World on Fire. This is season 2, and I am your host, Tom First. We're going to be talking about Psalm 2 today, so I want to begin by reading Psalm 2 to you. Wherever you are, if you'll just be in a disposition of surrender as you hear this psalm. Psalm 2. Why did the nations conspire and peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and his anointed, saying, "Let us burst their bonds apart and cast their cords from us." He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord has them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, "I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, 'You are my son. Today I have begotten you.' Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces with a potter's vessel. Now, therefore, O kings, be wise. Be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, with trembling. Kiss his feet. He will be angry, and you will perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Happy are all who take refuge in him." Friends, when we talk about prayer, we usually imagine something quiet: a bowed head, a closed door, a whispered hope that the world might change if only slightly. But the Psalms will not let us keep prayer quiet. They turn whispers into shouts and silence into protest and piety into poetry that burns. When we read them closely, prayer stops being an escape from politics. In fact, what it does is it changes politics into the holiest kind of politics there is. Something that's oriented toward the well-being and the good of my neighbor. Psalm 1 planted us by streams of wisdom. Psalm 2 will place us in the war room of the nations. Between them, we stand in a tension the Psalms never really resolve: the inner life that resists despair, and the outer life that resists domination. This is where every serious faith must live: the tension between contemplation and confrontation, between the quiet of Torah and the noise of tyranny. To pray the Psalms is to enter a language that does not flatter empire. It's a grammar of truth-telling, a vocabulary that remembers covenant in an age of forgetting. The Psalms do not pray for power, they rather pray against it, especially when power becomes cruel. They do not spiritualize suffering, they name suffering. They curse it, they hand it back to God. They remind us that to call God king is not to sanctify human kingship, it is to subvert human kingship. It is to say that no earthly ruler owns the future. No flag gets the last word. No election determines my value. No policy can annul the moral order of creation. This is why the Psalms are so dangerous. They teach ordinary people like me and you how to speak of divine sovereignty in the face of human domination. In every age, empire has its prayers too. They sound like national anthems, corporate slogans, political campaigns, even hashtags. They praise efficiency and consumption, transaction, domination, and fear. They promise safety in exchange for your silence, and they depend on our agreement to keep repeating the slogans and the propaganda mindlessly over and over and over. When the psalmist prays instead, "Deliver us, O Lord, for there is no God but you," that prayer is not private. It is a refusal. It is an act of non-cooperation with the idols of the age. You can hear this same thing in the opening line of Psalm 2. Why do the nations conspire? It's a question not of curiosity, it's a question of disbelief. How can those with so much power be so foolish? How can they rage against the very one who gives them breath? The psalmist sees through the spectacle, the rallies, the marches, the pageantries of control, the military parades. The psalmist sees through it all and discerns the same old drama underneath. Humans mistaking domination for destiny. Kings mistaking violence for order. Nations mistaking themselves for gods. And into that delusion, the psalmist prays. He doesn't organize an army. He doesn't organize a military parade. He organizes your imagination. He offers an alternative vision of reality, a world where God laughs at tyranny, where divine authority is not coercion but covenant, where peace does not come from domination, but by delight in God, in one another, in creation. That's what prayer does at its best. It reorders what empire disorders. It speaks a truer word than propaganda. It opens the human heart to a realm that no regime can colonize. The reign of God. This is why the Psalms have always been the hymnal of resistance for the people of God. This is why enslaved Africans sang them in the fields and monks prayed them under dictatorships. Freedom movements quoted them on picket lines and in jail cells. Because when you pray a psalm, you join an ancient conversation between the powerless and the divine. You stand in the lineage of a people who believe that worship could still remake the world. You learn, verse by verse, in the Psalms that crying out to God is not the opposite of action, it is action's beginning. So before we turn the page to Psalm 2, pause here. Ask yourself this. Who benefits when I stay silent? What would it cost me to speak as the psalmist speaks? To cry out for deliverance, for justice, for truth, and my own world on fire. Because prayer that does not disturb the powers is not prayer, it's performance. It's individual piety. And worship that never unsettles the comfortable is not worship, it's just theater. The psalm calls us back to something raw, unmanageable, wild, and dangerous. The living speech of a people who refuse to be tamed. So next time, we'll hear that speech erupt into public protest. The murmuring of the righteous becomes the roar of rebellion. The laughter of heaven becomes a song of liberation. And Psalm 2, a coronation psalm no less, will reveal not a tyrant enthroned, but a God who still sides with the vulnerable. Because every time the people of God learn to pray truthfully, another empire begins to crack. And that always teaches us to pray in a world on fire.